G'day boys and girls, this video is about cordless belt sanders. Now I say belt sanders, but currently I only have the one on the screen in front of you, the AEG or Ridgid 3-inch 18-volt cordless belt sander. I have nearly purchased the Milwaukee and the HiKOKI on several occasions, but never quite pulled the trigger and bought one because they're quite expensive and I didn't 100% need a belt sander, but curiosity wise I've always wanted one. And so when AEG contacted me a couple of weeks ago and said, "Would you like to have some tools, Mr. Tools?" I said, "Oh yeah, what have you got that I haven't got?" And I thought, belt sander. I want to play with a belt sander. Before the end of the video, maybe it will be put up against the Milwaukee or the Ryobi or the DeWalt or the HiKOKI / Metabo HPT, but who knows, it may just end up being a video about AEG depending on timing and money and everything else. So let's get into it and see what the features are of this particular tool. The model number is the BHBS18B. That is the worldwide number. The American number will be just here. The belts that go on this sander are 3 inches wide and 18 inches long, or 75 mil by 457 millimeters, and they do give you a couple in the box. Haven't had a look to see what grip they are yet. Presumably they're both different. We have 80 and a 120. So a couple there to get you started. I have got plenty more to keep me going, so we won't run out, trust me. It also comes with a dust bag with a clip on the end so that it won't come off too easily. I can see that nothing protrudes from this side of the tool, which is nice, meaning you can pretty much get flush. You'll miss out maybe by a couple of millimeters, but if you're able to set this right, you should be able to have the sandpaper sort of sticking out the side a bit so that your sandpaper can get hard up against the edge of a wall or whatever it is you happen to be sanding. It is variable speed from 135 to 300 meters per minute. That's how many meters of sandpaper is going across your project per minute. This front handle here is adjustable. It can slide up and down, as you can see there. There's just a screw there. It has onboard tool storage to adjust that handle, but it seems strange to have a tool on board just to adjust a handle, but I can't see anything else that it would actually be used for at the moment in relation to the belt or anything like that, so maybe I'll work it out as we go along. The onboard Allen key actually sticks out this side a little bit, so if it gets jammed and you can't get out, you can poke it out from this side. On the front of the tool, or the side of the tool, depending on how you look at it, we have the belt release / lock, and we've got an adjustment dial on the side here to make sure your belt tracks correctly. It does have a trigger lock so that you don't have to have your finger on the trigger and exhaust your finger if you're using this for a long period of time. Plus that also means you can set it going, put it down and race them. When putting on a sanding belt, we loosen. Make sure you pay attention to the directions of the arrows on the belt. You want it going the right direction as to not split the joint. Shove her on. Get it as close to the center as possible. Lock her on. And when you start this thing up, you might just need to adjust that tracking to get the belt going in the middle so it doesn't slide off the side or rub against the other side. But we'll do that in a moment when we get started. And when are we going to get started? Well, right about now, I guess. It's pouring with rain outside, and that means I'm going to have to use this inside, which is a bit annoying because I've got a lot of stuff to do and it'll be much easier outside. But we'll try it inside. I'll put the AEG bag on it here and we'll see how much dust it collects over whatever distance, and then I'll probably change to dust extraction because I don't want too much dust in the house, but we'll see how good this is first. So the main things I will be looking for when I'm using this tool is going to be how much pressure I can put down without it stalling or anything like that, you know, whether you can stick it down and really get stuck in or whether it's going to struggle a bit and slow down. Then how much dust it collects in the bag, we'll see how much it removes. That's of course important, but probably the most important thing with a cordless tool is how long it's going to run. This is going to suck through the juice pretty darn quick. The only cordless belt sanders I've used are the band file type ones. I've got one of those and I love it, and that doesn't use up the power much, but this is a different kettle of fish. This is a far bigger belt and the tool's got to work a lot harder because you're putting pressure on it. It's a lot more friction for it to overcome. So I'm not holding out much hope for the batteries lasting a long length of time. But all my batteries are charged. I've got 3 6 amp hours and a 3 amp hour to throw at this thing over the next couple of hours. So I'll see how well they go. Now, just because AEG have given this to me for free, don't expect me to go light on it. I am going to put it through its paces. I got a bunch of this old Vitex decking that I have removed from one part of the property. I'm going to clean up, cut down to some shorter pieces and use as a little path in front of my shed. So that's what I'm going to hit first with the sander. Got the bag on it and we're going to have a play, see how long this thing lasts, see how well it sands. I'm also going to see if I can sand in this orientation so I get the whole width of the board in one whack, but it might end up pushing the belt off the side. We'll have to wait and see. Just stop and have a quick look so you can see how it's going. Have a look there, it's taking everything back much quicker than a random orbital sander, which is probably what I would normally be using if I wasn't using this. It is of course a lot more aggressive. It's pretty quiet. Let's carry on. Before and after with about 30 seconds work. Doesn't take long to strip it off with the belt sander compared to other types of sanders. It's pretty quick and easy. So that's what I've done so far, and we are down to 2 bars. It was actually on 1 bar just a moment ago when I pushed it, so it's right on the brink there. I'll go till she's dead. Stops quick. Does not want to die. Looks like our bag is full, and this battery just doesn't want to die. It's been on 1 bar for ages, just flashing away, but the tool keeps on running, but spewing a lot of dust out the front. So let's take a wee look in the bag. That's a lot of dust. It's 1 battery charge and the thing is full. That'd take you a long time with a random orbital sander. Bag back on and we'll see if we can kill this battery. It has decided it doesn't want to go anymore. Battery's quite warm, nothing too bad. Go chuck that on charge and we'll see how much we did. So this is what I have been doing, and I haven't gone right to the ends because there's no point sanding pieces of wood that I'm only going to chuck on a fire. So I've done around 19 lineal meters. Most of it is 140 wide, just under 6 inches, and there's a few narrower ones in there as well. Is that a reasonable amount for a 6 amp hour battery? It actually did better than I thought, especially seeing as the battery light's been down pretty fast at the beginning. But those last couple, and especially the last one, hung in there quite a bit. So far I'm happy, because I probably wouldn't be doing that much more in one go anyway, and if I've got 4 batteries, should be all good. So the poor old AEG's been a bit lonely in this video so far, but now it has a couple of new friends. We've got the older brother, the Milwaukee, and we also have the HiKOKI. I've got brand new 80 grit belts on all 3 of these sanders, and we are going to have a go at this piece of Lawson cypress, which if you've never used this timber, it smells so good. So it's pretty rough. This test is more for me than you guys really, because it's going to be hard for you to tell what's going on. We're just going to get the feel of the tools, feel how much they're removing, and just feel how nice they are or are not to use. And then we'll talk about them later. The batteries I'm going to be using on these tools, sorry, a bit noisy today, is the 6 amp hour battery on here, the 6 amp hour high output on here, And on the HiKOKI, the 4 amp hour, because that's the biggest one they do, we'll talk about that as soon as I've finished sanding this. Well, the batteries are currently charging up, and for this test I will be using dust extraction rather than the bags. Now, I presume you noticed that when I did that test, I didn't have dust extraction on, I used the bags. That's because I couldn't find a fitting that would fit the HiKOKI. I got a ton of vac fittings and none of them slipped over that, so I decided to use the bags for this test. For the next test, we're going to do a stall test. I'm going to start off just gentle pressure and then just slowly keep adding more and more pressure to see if I can stall any of these, or if I can stall all of them, which one stalls the easiest. So the AEG was the easiest to stall, as you saw, but it still takes quite a lot of pressure to do it. You shouldn't be pushing down that hard on the tool in the first place. The Mliwaukee is second hardest to stall. I had to put quite a lot of pressure on, and I was worried that I was going to damage the tool, but eventually it did cut out. And as for the HiKOKI, I had to put a lot more weight on this tool. I ended up pushing down on it with my chest to try and get it to stall. And eventually it did. So torque wise, the HiKOKI or Metabo HPT, much better than the other two. So 1 point, 2 points, 3 points for this one. Not that I am in any way doing a point system. As for battery life, all three of them have had the same amount of sanding on this piece of cypress and our stall test, and the AEG showing 3 out of 4, the HiKOKI 3 out of 4, and the Mliwaukee also 3 out of 4. So as you can see, these things go through the battery pretty quick. You're going to have a lot of batteries on standby if you're planning on doing an entire floor or something with these tools. Much quicker material removal. Let's go back to the workbench and look at the additional features that the Mliwaukee and the HiKOKI have. We've already looked at the AEG. What's different about these two? Now, you already know about the features of the AEG, but do these two have anything different that the AEG doesn't have? They sure do. So let's take a look at those. Taking a look at the Mliwaukee, which is of course the big brother of the AEG, it too has a movable front handle, but if you take a look at this one, you'll see this weird ugly looking hole here, which looks like there's a piece of plastic missing or something. Well, it's not missing, it's because instead of adjusting it with a tool, this one is toolless. You just lift the lever, slide it up, lock it back down. So basically, why would you need to do that? Well, if you look at it here, it is in front of the tool. So if you want to get hard up against a wall or something, you can slide this back, lock it down, and now it is not protruding past the front of your tool. When we look at the HiKOKI, you'll see that the handle doesn't stick past the front of the tool anyway, so it is not adjustable. All of these sanders have variable speed, and all of them were running in their max speed in the video test that you've seen. I do, however, like running them a little bit slower for a lot of things I've found. It just helps stop the tool from taking off on you. I don't like where they've put the dial here on the Mliwaukee compared to the AEG. The AEG is up here by your hand. It's more intuitive in its positioning, although it doesn't actually tell you on the tool which direction is which. If you look very carefully on the top of the dial, you can see some numbers, but they're just black plastic, so it's just about impossible to tell what is going on. Are they even numbers? what does that say? B-O-O-E-E. What, you know, I can't even work out what those are supposed to be. Is that an A there? Is that an auto mode? I mean, what is going on? It definitely didn't seem to have an auto mode on it. The other thing that the Milwaukee has that the AEG does not have is lights. The HiKOKI also does not have lights, but the Milwaukee has a light here, shoots out the side so you can get close up to something on the sides, and it also has a light on the front and a rubber bumper so that you don't damage things. Neither the HiKOKI nor the AEG have a bumper on the front. Let's take a look at that lighting, just with some of the other lighting removed. It'll come on as soon as I click on a battery. So there you go, front and side. It's actually, they're quite good lights. A lot of placement of lights is pretty useless, but these aren't too bad, particularly this side one. The front one gets a little bit of a shadow here, but this one's pretty good. So yeah, if you were in a darkish situation trying to get up against a skirting board or something, then that might come in handy. So that's the basic differences between the Milwaukee and the AEG. The Milwaukee does have a slightly nicer base plate here that the belt runs on, but basically this area is the same. It has the same sort of tracking, which is a little bit flimsy on both the AEG and the Milwaukee. It's a little bit better on the Milwaukee than the AEG. But the one thing this has, which is more important than all of those over the AEG, is that it has more power. But that power does come at a cost. This thing possibly goes through batteries faster than all the others. It's a little bit hard to tell they were going through batteries so quick. Now, taking a look at the HiKOKI. The HiKOKI's variable speed is at the top of the handle here in a nice easy place to adjust it like the AEG, so that's good. But apart from that, it doesn't have any other extra features that are visible on the tool. There's no lights, there's no movable handle. You know, it's a pretty basic, solid looking unit. You'll notice down the bottom, this looks a bit more like a real belt sander. You know, it's a consistent size all the way around. This takes bigger belts than the other two. They're still 3 inches wide, but they're a bit longer because if you take a look at that, like I say, it looks like a real car, so to speak. And the next ones look like dragsters with that large wheel at the back and the small one at the front. Not as noticeable on the AEG. It's not quite as big a difference as it is with the Milwaukee, which means that the AEG has slightly more sandpaper touching your workpiece than the Milwaukee. There's not a lot in it, but this from front to back is around 205 millimeters, whereas this is about 215, so 10 millimeters or 3/8 of an inch longer in the sandpaper area, but they use exactly the same belts, just that wheel at the back there, not as big as that one. But the HiKOKI, also known as the Metabo HPT in North America, has one trick up its sleeve that the other two don't have, and that is an auto mode.
Auto mode test.
So I carried on in the auto mode and gave this whole side of this slab here, which is 2.5 meters long. I gave it a quick sand, got it to a point where I'll start now using a random orbital sander or some sort of sheet sander to finish it off. And it is, I was showing one bar a moment ago. So I imagine doing both sides of this with this sander would completely deplete the largest 36 volt HiKOKI battery there is. So that's the 4 amp hour 36 volt or 8 amp hour 18 volt if it was on an 18 volt tool. So these things go through the juice, but that's to be expected. I carried on using this tool to finish this piece of timber off because this removes the material much faster. There is one other trick that the HiKOKI has up its sleeve that the other two do not, but it's not something that's actually on the tool, but it is something that attaches to the tool, and that is an AC power adapter. Clip that on there, you can now run this thing all day. And on this sort of tool, that's super handy because these things are super hungry on batteries. So if you can run it on power, if you're doing a lot of stuff on a site, you're doing, you know, flooring and things, then the battery to AC adapter is a good option. I don't use this adapter much. I just find it a little bit cumbersome and stuff, and most of the time I'm doing things that I don't need it for a long period of time, and I have enough batteries that I can get through the task. But this thing goes through batteries so quick that one of these, super handy. If we take a look at this dust on the front was from just the tool running, and so I found that the HiKOKI had the worst dust extraction, worst dust collection compared to the other two. I think the Milwaukee seemed to be the best. The tool almost looks brand new still, you know, there's hardly any dust on it. Whereas this one, yeah, is constantly getting quite dusty all over, much dustier than the other two. Let's look at some of the stats of the three of them all together. Let's start with weight. The HiKOKI bare tool, no battery, a little bit of dust and a sanding belt, comes in at 3.5 kgs, which is 1 kg less than what it says on the HiKOKI New Zealand website. I need to update the website, guys. Find that a lot with tool companies. They do not get things right on the website. Never trust tool company websites. Make sure you come and watch tools and stuff so that you can see what they actually are. So, exactly the same weight as the HiKOKI, and AEG feels just a little bit lighter, quite a bit lighter, 2.9 kgs. So 2.9, 3.5, 3.5. Yeah, this is about 50 grams heavier than the Milwaukee. So not a lot in it, but if you're concerned about weight, that is the tool for you. Next up, speed. Looking at the speeds of the three of them, this is the order from slowest to fastest. The AEG going from 135 to 300 meters per minute. The Milwaukee from 210 to 410. And the HiKOKI starts lower than the AEG and goes higher than the Milwaukee from 122 to 450 meters per minute. The AEG and the Milwaukee use the same belt, a 75 by 457 millimeter belt, or 3 inch by 18 inch. The HiKOKI, as I mentioned earlier, slightly bigger with a 75 by 533 millimeter belt, or 3 inch by 21 inch. When it comes to using the three tools, this one you notice is like, it doesn't sit flat, sort of wants to lean to one side. And even when I was using it, it felt weird trying to get it dead flat. It just didn't, it felt like something was maybe slightly out of whack, but maybe that's just me and I need to get used to the tool. Also, this big front area here between the roller and the plate starting it's quite a large area there, and I found I tend to start sort of not flat with the angle of the handle compared to these other two. I would end up starting like on a bit of an angle and then drop down, whereas these two are easy to start just bang flat. But that's something you'd sort of get used to, you know, pretty quickly with the tool. When you're trying all sorts of different tools, when you're doing what I do on this channel, sometimes things feel weird just because you've been using other ones that are different. So if I've been using the AEG and the Milwaukee and I go just straight down flat on those, and then this one's just got slightly different angles on the handle and the belts, it just makes it feel a bit odd. But if I'd been using that one for 2 weeks earlier, then those ones would have felt odd. So don't read too much into that, because out of these tools, I've used this one the most. Now, I don't usually talk about price in my videos for a multitude of reasons, which people don't seem to understand. I can't tell you a price because everywhere in the world sells all these things, different prices, okay? Everybody's not in America, and prices fluctuate. The price today will be different next week, might be different another week from now. Somebody gets it on special. I can't stand tool reviews when they say, oh, this one was only $200, but I got it on a deal in a combo pack on special, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so it doesn't count at all. So, anyway. This is not the order price-wise. This is. So, in this country, clearly the cheapest. Quite a big jump to these two. Not a massive difference between these two in price, but this one definitely in the middle. Now, the most important thing, removal rates. Basically, the same order they were in just a moment ago. The AEG removes the least. You have to work longer, which means your battery won't last as long. So even though this gets better runtime with the battery, you have to go over the same area a lot more than you do with the other two, so it will negate that. So in the end, you might get around the same, or you might get slightly less with the AEG, even though it's run longer. So there is a clear difference in material removal between the AEG and the Milwaukee, and then there is another big jump between the Milwaukee and the HiKOKI. When I was comparing these two against each other, I thought, oh yeah, the Milwaukee's removing a lot more material. Then once I started using the HiKOKI, I thought, I don't really want to use the other two anymore because this is so much quicker. The HiKOKI removes stuff real quick compared to these two. Some of that will be the extra power this has, because if I haven't already mentioned it, this is a 36 volt tool and these two are only 18 volt. So this has a bit more oomph, and it also has slightly bigger belts, and those two things put together means this thing chews through the timber a lot quicker. So if we are to wrap this whole thing up, tie it up with a nice pretty little bow, I am going to put them basically in the order you see on the bench. This is something I'm going to say that I didn't expect at the beginning. I don't mind all of these tools. I'd be happy to use any of them. And when I started this video, I thought, cordless belt sanders, really? Is this going to be any good? And some of you are not going to agree with me because of one issue. So yeah, they work quite well as belt sanders. If you're used to using a random orbital sander or sheet sanders and stuff cordless, but you want something that removes material quicker, then these will remove it much, much, much quicker. Okay, belt sanders chew through stuff real quick, but they're no good for fine finishing stuff. You need to go over it with this, get rid of all the rough stuff, any dips and what have you, get it roughly to the level you want, and then use a random orbital sander or sheet sanders, some sort of finishing sander, to actually get it nice, because you need to keep these dead flat. If you give it a little tweak, you'll leave a cut in your timber basically, you'll leave grooves and stuff. These are just rough, you know, they're kind of like reciprocating saws, you know, they're just for hacking things apart, you know. This is just for ripping off all the rough material before you get a nice sander and do the job properly. But they're great at what they do. But, this is the point I'm getting to, a lot of you aren't going to like them for the plain and simple fact is they chew through batteries too quick. There's a lot of people that seem to expect that they're going to stick a battery on a cordless tool and it's just going to run all day. Welcome to the real world, that doesn't happen. So if you're using these things hard out, you're sanding a floor, you're pushing down on it a lot, you haven't got a nice belt on there, you're just really giving the tool shit, they're only going to last a few minutes. They're not going to last you very long. You need a lot of batteries, or in the case of the HiKOKI, whack on the AC adapter. But I'm happy with all three tools if you take the runtime factor out of it. I'm happy using this, I'm happy using this, I'm happy using this. I don't say that very often in my reviews, but there is a clear difference, you know. This one is nicer than this one, and this one is nicer than this one. So, if you were going to buy one, if I was going to recommend one to you, it would definitely be the HiKOKI, just because it's so much quicker removal of material, and it has that AC option, and the belts, it just feels a more solid tool, and yeah, it does the job good. So that's another review done and dusted. I've got a heap more sanding I need to go and do, so I'm going to put these to a bit more work, and if any of them die or anything before I finish, I'll tack a quick little bit on the video somewhere. But otherwise, thanks for watching guys, and I will see you all on another review again next week. Cheers. Tools out. When using belt sanders, make sure the material you are sanding is well secured. You'll notice down the bottom that this looks a bit more bloody hell. But the HiKOKI, also known as the Makita HPT in North America, and I've just got to deal to that alarm. Did I say per second on one of the other ones? If I did, that was just a wee little cock up. Oh, A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, that's odd. Is this going to blow dust everywhere? A little bit. So I just fired some dust out of that.